listen to this and listen to every word, because every word is important. Bitcoin is the first. First, global. That's really important, as Michael said. Private. Now, it's open source, but there's no government involvement. So private. So first, global, private, digital, rules-based monetary system in the history of the world. It is a very big idea.
Tone changed. Regulators in Switzerland, Germany, France, England started to allow cryptocurrencies, like Canada has an ETF with Bitcoin in it and Ethereum. That changed the tone of the domestic regulator in the United States, and I was able to start to explore it as an asset class.
The President of the United States giving a green light to Bitcoin. You have a one-page memo and it says, whereas 40 million Americans, rely upon this and this is part of their future, I hereby direct every government agency to get educated on Bitcoin and figure out how you incorporate it into the government. And I think that if I scan the last 100 years of history and I ask, when's the last time the President of the United States directed the government to embrace a new asset class? The answer is never.
That's correct.
Ellen was appointed Treasury Secretary. I remember her first comments about Bitcoin were money laundering, nefarious characters, environmentally damaging. And then
the president just issued a couple of weeks ago an executive order tasking us and other agencies with thinking about the regulation of crypto.
I mean, you're less skeptical about it than in previous. I mean, we've been talking about it together for a long time now, and I think you've had a skepticism about crypto technology.
I have a little bit of skepticism because there are, I think, valid concerns around it. Some have to do with financial stability, consumer investor protection, use for illicit transactions and other things.
Right.
Someone's whispering in her ear.
On the other hand, there are benefits from crypto, and we recognize that innovation in the payment system can be a healthy thing. We would like to come out eventually with recommendations that will create a regulatory environment in which healthy innovation.
About this, you think it might be Gary Gensler. There is someone whispering in the ears of politicians. If you want the U.S. to lose out on this, one of the most amazing innovation platforms of all times, you keep talking like that. So she has changed her tune. So I'm very positive here. And of course, we're meeting people from around the world, just met from Honduras, Mexico. I think the movement is spreading pretty quickly now.
Generally speaking, when you have a very large, fast-growing asset class, you want some exposure to it. You want to invest in it. You want to find places to deploy capital so you can enjoy some of that growth, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Politicians have come to me and said, I want to pull together a room of Bitcoin enthusiasts, and I really want to learn from them what they want from us. Think about that. What we're seeing with Bitcoin and traditional institutional investors is the same thing ARK is seeing about all of our strategies, associated with all of our strategies. They're very volatile. That's scary for institutional investors. There's no index. They're not in my index. So
I want to talk about indexing for a moment. Now, many of you know what that is if you're an institution, but let's say you're a very, very wealthy Middle East sovereign fund and you're managing, I don't know, $500 billion. And you don't need any more oil as an investment because you've already got that in the ground. So you go to an indexer like me and say, look, give me the S&P, less energy, less airlines. And that's what indexers do. These massive pools of capital, these trillion-dollar pools, own this much crypto, this much, practically nothing. It's the purvey of high net worth individuals, hedge funds, and retail investors. And that's okay. But what we're missing is policy. When we get policy and the regulator regulates, that's not a negative thing. The spigots of capital are going to flood into this sector like you've never seen. And so for those
Have a price target in 2030 for Bitcoin of more than $1 million per Bitcoin. How we build that case, we see institutional investors, all we expect over the next 8 years is that 2.5%, roughly 2.5% of assets, institutional assets, are allocated to Bitcoin. So we don't need a lot. And if it's more than that, and that's how institutional investors work, they tiptoe in. In the 70s, it was real estate. In the 80s, it was emerging markets, 80s and 90s. And now I think it's going to be crypto starting with Bitcoin. And that's very important, starting with Bitcoin, because they understand what it is and what it's not. It's not a security.
We are so early into crypto. I think the potential of this sector, when we build out the compliance infrastructure, is trillions of dollars.
those of us that can invest in it now, you're getting ahead of what's going to be a huge wave of interest when policy occurs. I predict in the next 10 years that crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, all of this innovation will be the 12th sector of the S&P. Bitcoin is not a coin, it's software. Ethereum is software. Avalanche is software. Helium is software. Solana is software. It's all software. And the smartest hands over keyboards today in the world are developing on the chain and bringing innovation to financial services, which in the end is the largest sector on earth. Now, what we need is policy. We need government to catch up with us so that we don't lose leadership in America to this very important 12th sector of the economy. There's no question. So let me give you a quick update, because I've been spending a lot of time in Washington in the last 3 months, a lot of time. And the good news is, on a bipartisan basis, there are many senators and reps that are thinking about this in a proactive way.
A lot of people have anxiety about regulation, and they ask me, aren't you afraid? And I do not have anxiety about regulation. You know, when I look at this, I say, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be worked through. FASB's working through some accounting issues, FDIC's working through some banking issues, SEC's working through some security issues. You know, the administration's working through all their issues. But regardless of how fast that happens and how sharp that occurs, I don't think there's any outcome other than favorable for Bitcoin. And I think that what I say over and over again is, Bitcoin is the ethical safe haven for any public figure, and it is the technical safe haven for any technical company, and it is the financial safe haven for any investors. So if you have anxiety, I think that people that are thinking about this are going to realize that Bitcoin is the risk-off crypto asset network, and all of this regulation is going to create volatility. And senators, Congress, persons, governors, or whenever I meet with billionaires or CEOs, normally what they say to me is, my daughter or my son said you're a rock star and I have to meet you. Okay? And they're like, I had a guy come to my house. I met his son, and the next day the son brought his father, and his father could like buy the entire city of Miami. And he said, well, I don't know what's going on, but I know Bitcoin is really important, and my son says I got to sit down and listen. And so I orange pilled him for 2 hours. And I'm not going to say who, because it's such a common story, but my point here is, every one of you knows someone. Go tell a CEO, go tell your father, go tell your mother, go tell somebody that Bitcoin's going to change the world and they should figure out more about it, because the number one thing you can do is educate the world on Bitcoin.